Want me to accept?
We were chatting a little bit about this idea that even though we're all good presenters, everybody in this program is fantastic at what they do, doesn't mean we can't be better and want to improve. But in addition to all of the speaking mechanics and the articulation issues and the storytelling challenges, we're human beings at the base. And that means that we're subjected to the same trials and tribulations of the negative news, moods, weather, the onslaught of bad stuff in this world. There's people here now having graduation parties, and I just want to tell those kids, get ready for some pain, man.
Yeah.
That's my motivational talk. Get ready for pain.
Exactly. But I think at the moment, particularly, with the pandemic and the lockdowns being lifted, and, people it is affecting people's mental health. There's no doubt about that. And even the sort of sunniest of person is affected by it. I don't think you can't be, really. Yeah. And it's keeping that sort of optimism, isn't it, really? Going.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
And as speakers and presenters and people who tend to be in front of people more than the average bear, and especially if you're published, if you're writing, we need to not be about the doomsday all the time. We need to find ways to show the light.
Yeah.
And to talk about better days. I remember Paul McCartney, you'll enjoy this from your part of the world. He's from Britain.
Well.
He's one of the Beatles.
Yeah, I know. I actually met Ringo Starr, but that's another story.
Good for you. I'd like to hear that story.
I will tell you.
McCartney gets divorced from Heather Mills.
Yeah.
Do you remember Heather?
Yeah. Oh dear. Yes, I do.
She had she came into his life, and it happened very quickly, and you can kind of see he was taken, and the kids find out later, McCartney's kids didn't really care for her much. They thought it happened too quickly. I don't know any of these people, but this is just what you see from a distance. And McCartney, who was one of the wealthiest people in entertainment history at the time, finally couldn't take it anymore. I don't know who filed for divorce. I suspect it was him. But then he has, Paul loves the camera and he loves interviews and he's always out there. So he has to do now a series of interviews and talk about a very sensitive subject, one that he's sure to be asked, how you doing, after the divorce. And he had a great line, and I don't know if it was Larry King or who was interviewing him at the time, but whoever it was said to him the question everybody wanted to hear the answer to, and the question he had come to expect. So sorry about the divorce. How are you feeling? And McCartney had the best line ever, and I've used it many times since. And the line was, well, it helps not to talk about it. Which I thought was brilliant, because what he was saying was, I don't need more couch therapy. I don't want this to be the only thing I talk about with everybody. Otherwise, I'll never get past it.
Yeah.
My better days ahead of me are without Heather Mills. And the only way I can get there is by stop talking about this woman.
Yeah.
Very clever, don't you think?
Absolutely, very clever indeed. Because that stops the interviewer going and asking any more, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So it's like putting up a fence to say, this is enough, and move forward, really, which I think is very, very, very clever on Paul's
And here
part.
we are in the pandemic, just keep thinking we're spinning out of it, and then we keep getting pulled back in for various reasons. And that part of your mind that says, I need to think about the future. I need to ignore this bad news. I remember I had this really bad in 1991.
Yeah.
When I think it was 91, when the World Trade Center was attacked, and the 4 planes hit. The Pentagon was the 4th one, and the 2 hit the World Trade Center, 1 hit the Pentagon or close to it.
Yeah.
And 1 landed in a field in Shanksburg or Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And I was on the road at the time, Eve, doing public seminars, and I was 90 minutes from Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And it didn't matter that I was 90 minutes. In my head, it mattered, but in the end, it didn't matter, of course. But I had a form of PTSD. I didn't know it at the time. I had some sort of a breakdown.
Yeah.
I was weak and feeble, and I couldn't function. I had vertigo.
Yeah.
I couldn't return my rental car. I had to keep it for 2 weeks because I had no way to get home. I would
Yeah.
normally have returned the car and flown home. I kept the car. I drove it home. I drove it out on the next trip.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say, on that, when that happened, I was actually working in the BBC newsroom, and it was a real dramatic impact because obviously we were watching everything live, well, you know, as live as it could be happening, and it was absolutely devastating. And then I had to actually edit around a sort of a recap of everything that had happened. And unfortunately, that's, as you talk about, post-traumatic syndrome, when you're actually looking at all the footage coming in, much of it we couldn't actually put out because there were some really traumatic things happening in terms of people in those buildings and what they, you know, I mean, I don't know whether I should talk about it now, but it was very distressing. And we, you know, I had to be, in a sense, we couldn't put out a lot of what we were seeing because it was so distressing and traumatic.
Yeah.
And, you have to have a sort of, in a sense, of responsibility that you don't put out the horrific things that we were getting pictures of. So
this is an interesting example because as a responsible media person at the BBC, you're making decisions about what's reasonable to show people.
Yeah.
When do you cut it off?
Yeah.
What are the boundaries of good taste? Or at some point, maybe the graphic images do more harm than good. Somebody has to make a decision about this stuff.
Yeah.
My point is, our point in this little confab is that we have to make those individual decisions about ourselves. How much more of this shit can I take? Yeah. And who has the ability to turn that TV off in the case of 9/11, or in the case of the internet, who has the ability not to go surfing on the news sites or check the COVID stats every single day? I did it for a while.
Yeah.
And I quickly found out this was not a good way to spend my time. I mean, I stopped checking COVID stats 8 months ago. How long has it been now? 18 months.
About that, March. Well, I mean, it's been longer than March 2020 because we went into lockdown in March 2020. But I suppose if you think about it, it was sort of China at the end of 2019, which is why it's called COVID-19. Yeah. And then everywhere else, really. I don't know that. Are there any countries that haven't been touched? I'm not sure. I don't know.
Oh, I don't think so.
No.
And everybody takes a turn, and that's the problem. You know, it comes in waves, and if it's not hot over here, it's hot over here. And if your mind is predisposed to the bad news, you don't even celebrate the fact that your country's doing okay. You start focusing now that Indonesia is not doing so well.
Yeah.
And this is
they do say that no one's safe until everyone's safe. And that was the case with polio as well, or is the case with polio. But I think, it is challenging because, as you say, I mean, even Tokyo with the Olympics and Paralympics, the cases there are getting very steep. Yeah. So it is, it's something, it is a challenge to sometimes keep positive, as you're saying.
Well, then that's the thing with speakers, because we suffer the negative emotions, I call them, the negative emotions of speaking before we go on stage, the nerves, the anxiety. I'm not prepared. I don't feel well today. I'm having a bad hair day. Someone in the audience said something sideways to me just before I came to the stage.
Yeah.
I had a fight with my husband this morning, or my wife, and none of that matters. As professionals, we play over that.
Yeah.
And it's especially important when you're going into a big thing where people are judging you and making decisions about you. That's why I wanted to chat about it today. Yeah. Everybody I talk to, everybody that's interested in getting better at speaking gets this speech.
Yeah.
Because
No, I totally agree. Because I think they don't know. Nobody in the audience knows what you've been through. And to be honest, they don't want to know, do they, really? They're just there in a sort of a passive mode, if you like, to listen.
Well,
Unless
some
you
may
get
want
them
to,
active.
and some may want to, and here you are, you know, spouting, and you're going to get some positive reinforcement, which is
Yeah,
really creepy. You're
yeah,
saying stuff you shouldn't be focused on, and you're going to get positive reinforcement from negative people who glom onto that stuff.
yeah,
And some small part of your brain is going to say, well, I served them. No,
yeah,
you didn't. And you
yeah.
didn't serve yourself either.
No,
And so
no.
we'll spend more time on the things to stop those triggers from happening,
Yeah,
because there's ways to backspin these bad thoughts, negative thoughts, anxiety. I have them too. We
yeah,
especially have them during down times, and
yeah.
I'm glad to spend a few minutes on it today.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I think, you're so right, because little things are going on in your head that it's quite useful to get rid of if you can. And I think that's a good technique to learn, is how to counter the distractions really that go on in your head, if you like, that affect what you're doing. So I think that's a really valuable lesson. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.